Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, ni hao, buenos días, buenas tardes, ese Chiaqualo, what up, though? This is Cafe Melange Part 2. Continuing from a wee bit ago. I referenced the basic concepts of Earth, human civilization, the 5 areas of civilization, the siete categories of ethnic groups, and the ocho, effectively, or nueve linguistic clans. So then I also provide the brief synopsis of the progression of human religion, with the emphasis on the 2 distinct branches of human civilization, and the, the stages of development, from initial stages, time immemorial, to the emergence of the initial founders of religious institutions, right? Traditions, to the awakening period, and then to the pluralistic stage of reconciliation and new conventionality, and through today. So, that being stated, what I mentioned, continuing with, are the 12, the 12 different types of calendars that exist, that emerge from and that are observed by these different traditions and communities. And then also I think it's again 31 main rivers of the earth, to give some tangible temporal context to civilization. So the 12 calendars. I've given spiels about this before, so my intention is just to be general with this. To understand how the calendars work, they're basically 2 types of calendars. There's a solar calendar and there's a lunar calendar. The solar calendar is predicated upon the orbit of the Earth around the Soleil, and which is basically 365 days, 365 days. That's a year. The months are apportioned accordingly. And then there's the lunar calendar, which is predicated upon the cycle of the moon around the Earth, which is about 29.5 days. And that's the duration of a month. And approximately 12 of those months equals one orbit of the Earth, and that's a year. So but the emphasis is on the duration of the month rather than the duration of the entire year. And so the observances in the different traditions are predicated upon these cycles. Some of these observances are predicated upon the lunar month, either happening often either on the new moon or the full moon, or thereabouts, or if it's a solar calendar, happening on a fixed day based upon the solar calendar. So that being said, there is another +1 category of calendar, which is an intercalary calendar, which is not predicated upon lunar or necessarily fixed on solar, but basically it's a quasi-solar calendar, but the months are apportioned based upon a different mathematical methodology, and usually there is an intercalary period, meaning like an extra period at the end of the year, to add additional amount of days to the year, so that the total amount of days equals 365 days. So those are the basic types of calendars that exist. Now, that being said, here are the 12 types specific to religious traditions. The first one I'm going to share is, I'll actually save that for last. So the first one I'll share is the Hebrew calendar. So the Hebrew calendar is come from the tradition of Israel. It is a lunar calendar that makes adjustments solar based. The adjustments is that there's a leap month every so often, every few years. There's an additional month that's added to the calendar, so that they're actually 13 months in a year, so that the observances are maintained in the same basic season, right? So that is the methodology within the Hebrew calendar. It's a lunar calendar with leap month months every few years. That's the first calendar. The second calendar is the Vikram Sambat calendar. The Vikram Sambat calendar is from Hindu tradition, and it is a lunar solar calendar as well, meaning that it is based upon the lunar cycle. The months are fixed, um, based upon the duration of the cycle of the moon. And again, just like the Hebrew calendar, there are adjustments. There's a leap month every few years so that the observances stay in the same kind of seasonal period. And the observances are based upon the lunar cycle. The next calendar is the Veer Samvat calendar from Jain tradition. And that calendar is also a lunar solar calendar. It runs simultaneous with the Vikram Sambat calendar, although there are different observances, but the methodology is the same. The year count is different as well. The fourth calendar is the Buddha calendar, the Buddhist calendar. And so, to be honest, the Buddha calendar um, is less emphasizes less the duration of years. It is a lunar calendar because there are observances within the Buddhist calendar that are predicated upon the lunar cycle, like Prasada days and then Puja days. But those are the emphasis of those are on the month of the year rather than the count of the year. So um, the, the reason for me saying that is that there are many Buddhists who observe many different types of calendars, and so I'm less concerned about the actual calendar, but um, maintain a mindfulness of when the actual cycles of the moon happen, so that the observances are made accordingly. But the Buddha calendar generally coincides with the Vikram Sambat calendar as well, from Hindu tradition, uh, except there are different observances based upon the lunar cycle. So that's numero cuatro. Numero cinco is the Handu calendar from Chinese tradition, which is also a lunar solar calendar with a similar methodology of leap months that are added every few years, so that the observances occur in the same season, generally from year to year. Um, the number of the count of the year is different, meaning that we're in a different year in the Chinese calendar than on other calendars. However, there is uh, the same methodology of the leap months. So that is the Chinese calendar. Numero seis is the Hijra calendar. So this one is also a lunar calendar, but it is not a solar calendar as well. It is a strictly lunar calendar, which means that it does not make adjustments from year to year, so that the observances are in the same season from year to year. So it is a strictly lunar calendar, meaning it's based only on the cycle of the moon. Um, and I'll leave it at that because I've already explained what a lunar calendar does. Let's see where we are. This is ocho, somewhere around there. It's the Gregorian calendar, and this is the Christian calendar. So actually, within Christianity, there are a number of different calendars. Predominantly, uh, the Gregorian and Orthodox calendar, for lack of a good word at the moment. The Gregorian calendar is the one that utilized through the Vatican and through Protestant Christianity, so it's the vast percentage of the Christian community that utilizes the Gregorian calendar, although even there are distinctions therein as well. But for the purpose of this conversation, I'm just going to address the Gregorian calendar. It is a solar calendar, meaning that it is predicated upon directly the cycle of the Earth around the Soleil. So it's 365 days with a leap day every 4 years, every 4 years. For English speakers, this is most likely basic elementary school information. Um, the months are apportioned in a somewhat distinct methodology, but it's not according to the cycle of the moon. They either have usually 30 or 31 days. And so there's a different story that's attributed to that. So, but the observances actually, it's a little bit complicated how Easter and particularly Easter is calculated, but basically it is actually based upon lunar cycle and solar cycle. But for the purpose of just calendar itself, it's a solar calendar with a leap day every 4 years. Next joint is the Naxi calendar from Sikh tradition. The Sikh calendar, the Sikhi, is a solar calendar, and but it also maintains certain affiliation with lunar cycles as well in terms of observances, because it emerges from a lunar solar tradition or experience, I should say. Um, so, but again, it's 365 days, if I recall correctly, with a leap day every 4 years. Um, and the months are um, 30 and 31 days as well. The methodology is distinct from the Gregorian calendar, or the sequence is distinct from the Gregorian calendar. Um, and but many of the observances in the Sikh calendar, the actual days are based upon the lunar cycle. Some are based on the solar, but some are based on the lunar. But anyways, that's that. Next calendar is the Bastani Haha, the Zarathustrian, the calendar that emerges from Zarathustrian tradition. So this one is a little bit further complicated. Um, it actually goes into the category of one of the intercalary period, or one of the intercalary calendars. That is basically a solar calendar that has an adjusted period at the end of the year. Every month is 30 days. That makes it simple. However, the way it's counted, the year count is different within the diaspora, within the Zarathustrian diaspora, and that is attributable to the migration of Zarathustrians through the centuries, and there being different methodologies that emerge within that migration, depending upon amongst the different communities. And so, amidst a coalescence of the communities within recent century or so, there's work to uh, uh, to bring together the calendars so that there's certain uniformity. And so there are a number of different reckonings. And so we utilize the Bastani Fosli reckoning as a count for the Zarathustrian calendar. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. So the next calendar is the Mayan calendar, and the Mayan calendar continues on. And hi, hi. The Mayan calendar continues on, and there are also a number of different ways of counting the Mayan calendar. So we use the Ha'ab count, the Ha'ab long count. And so uh, the Mayan calendar is also an intercalary calendar. It's basically solar, but the months are 20 days each, so that makes it simple as well. There are 18 months of 20 days, and then there's an intercalary period every year as well. Um, so there's that. And then the 11th calendar is Nur Onse, is Baha'i calendar, the Badi calendar. And so the Badi calendar is also an intercalary period, or intercalary calendar. It is 19 months of 19 days. Oh, how about that? Which equates to 361 days. And then at the end of the year, there's a period of 4 days, intercalary period, um, where it equates to 365. And sometimes it's 366, 366. And so it equals a full cycle of the Earth around the Soleil. Um, and the observances are based upon that as well. 19 days in a month, 19 months in a year. Recently, there are adjustments within the Baha'i calendar, within the Badi calendar, where the observances, many of the main observances, particularly commemorations, are based upon the lunar calendar, because again, that's the experience that the Baha'i faith emerges from. And so, to honor that alignment, the observances are continuing on based upon the lunar cycle, but still just adjusted to the body calendar of 19 months and 19 days. So those are the 11 calendars. Now the 12th calendar, to sum it up, is a summation calendar. It's the Holy Earth calendar. That's based upon all of these different methodologies, all these observances, all these counts, and additionally. And so basically, it is a lunar solar calendar with an intercalary period, and this is how it works. Um, the months are based upon the lunar cycle, basically uh, alternating, just like the lunar calendars do, of between 29 and 30 days. Um, the odd months are 30 days, 30, and the even months are 29 days. So there's that lunar calendar characteristic to it, but it's also a solar calendar in that it is adjusted each year to account for the cycle of the Earth around the Soleil, which means that there's an intercalary period of 11 days usually, and then 12 days for a leap year every um, every 4 years. So it's lunar, it's solar, it's intercalary, and it is a methodology for um, providing certain tangible cohesion amongst all these other different calendars, and all the observances within all these other calendars as well, particularly the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the earth, and a mindfulness of these cycles and observances. So that's the Holy Earth calendar. Those are the Dosai calendars. That covers a lot of the Earth right there. So that is, it's actually very important to have an awareness of this, because these cycles, these observances, have a significant influence in human behavior. So regardless of what profession the person is in, what field of endeavor, whatever else, it's beneficial to know what's going on around oneself, within one's own community, particularly when that community is rather cosmopolitan, but also particularly when one's endeavors are international of nature. To know what's good, what can be expected in the next month in a certain community, what productivity levels are, what stress levels are, what consumption levels are, and additionally, it's a lot of stuff that goes on based upon these cycles and based upon these observances. So just having a mindfulness of this, not even practicing or doing it oneself, but just knowing when it's happening, and like getting an intuitive sense of planning, and additionally, that's very important and it's very beneficial. So that's it in a nutshell. Um, those are the calendars. So we go into the concluding joint for this joint, which is the rivers. So I already mentioned the reason for doing it. It's a matter of having an understanding of the importance of rivers, civilizational, but also naturally, spiritually, and additionally. Uh, Souls have grown deep at the rivers. Um, so I'll leave it at that. Um, when we take better care of our rivers and keep them cleaner, then we might be further readily able to appreciate the significance of rivers accordingly, um, as sources of life. So that being said, here are the big rivers around the earth, and the zones that are effectively established um, in the proximity of these rivers. It ain't all the rivers, and it's arguable which ones to include. At some point, lines are drawn. And so, like I said, I think this is 31, 31, if I recall correctly, number of rivers. But here we go. So we go from the northern coast of Russia. We have, and my pronunciation is in a continual process of improvement and learning. So patience is solicited. Russian North Coast. We go from Ob, Yenisei, Lena, and Amur. That stretches along the coast, the northern coast of Russia. Then continuing south from there, along the east coast of Asia, there's Huang, Yangtze, and Mekong rivers, that go off into the eastern shores of East Asia. And then we turn a little bit west, and towards India, and we have the Ganges and the Indus rivers, um, that go out into effectively Sea of Bengal, Indian Ocean, respectively. Um, then from there, we go a little bit north and a little bit west, and we have the Sir Darya and Amudarya, and actually in another order, Amudarya and Sir Darya. which run somewhat parallel into the ROC, but as we are aware, the ROC is in straits right now. Um, but that's the those are the rivers, and then continuing on further west, we go towards the land of Iraq, Mesopotamia, or the Middle East. We have the Tigris River, the Euphrates River, and a little bit further west we have the Jordan River. And so there are those. And then north from there, on the other side of the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, we have the Volga that comes from the northern portion of Western Russia. And then we have the Danube, the Volga that goes effectively into the Caspian Sea. And then we have the Danube that goes, stretches west to east from Eastern Europe, from the Alps towards the Black Sea. But approach very proximately with each other in those bodies of water. So there are those. Then we have north of the Danube, we have the Rhine River that goes from east to west, and letting out into the I think it's the North Sea, towards the English Channel, but Deutschland, in northern Europe. So from there, we cross the Alps, go on to the other side of the Mediterranean Ocean, or excuse me, the Mediterranean Sea, and we find the Nile River. And the Nile River stretches as the longest river, um, letting out from letting out in the Nile Delta into the Mediterranean Ocean, but stretching all the way coming up from south, um, in East Africa, the Great Lakes region. Um, that's the Nile River, stretching from the Great Lakes region all the way to the Nile Delta in Egypt and the Mediterranean Sea. So from that area, the Great Lakes region, and further west, south and west of the Great Lakes region, we have the Zambezi River that goes from west to east and lets out into effectively the Indian Ocean. And that's that river. So from the Zambezi, we go north a wee bit on the west coast of Africa, or towards the west coast of Africa, or along the west coast of Africa. And we find the Congo River. And the Congo River goes in the opposite direction, in the other direction, from east to west, and lets out into the Atlantic Ocean. And from there, we continue further north, and further west, to the area of the Twi and the Igbo, which are the native African tribal communities of West Africa, and the river that bends in from the land of Mali and the vicinity of Timbuktu towards um, uh, the Atlantic Ocean, the Gold Coast. Um, so that's the summation of rivers for the Eastern Hemisphere that we include on this list. Then we cross the Atlantic and we get into the West Coast, or excuse me, the West Hemisphere. We begin from the southern portion of the West Hemisphere. We have two rivers that come from the land of the Guarani, and another one that comes from one river that comes from the land of the Guarani, approximately, and another river that comes from the land of the Inca, approximately, that join together and let out into the Atlantic Ocean, thereabouts, amidst Argentina and Buenos Aires. So those are those two rivers. But then we also have the big river that stretches across Yanomami land, and lets out into the Atlantic Ocean. That is further north of the previous two that I mentioned. And so those are three of the major rivers in that vicinity. And we continue further north along the stretch of hills of Mayan land towards Navajo land, and Hopi land. And we find two rivers that stretch nearly parallel with each other from north to south along the mountain range of the west portion of the western continent, and one letting out into the Gulf of Mexico, um, and that body of water, and the other letting out into the Pacific Ocean. And I'm also, you might notice, mindful of the words that I utilize because many of the names for these rivers are settler words, and so our protocol is to provide optimal respect and deference towards native tradition and native community. Um, and so we refer to the geography with that mindfulness as well. So that's what I'm doing. Those are those two rivers. And you can see I've mentioned settler nations and settler names, so it's other than being anti-settler, it's just a matter of providing due respect and honor for native brethren and mindfulness, particularly because there's a lot of improvement to be done in the conditions. So that being said, we keep that mindfulness. Continuing on, further north, we approach the river that goes from east to west, from the big mountain range towards the Pacific Ocean, from the land of the Ute towards the land of the Shoshone and into the Pacific Ocean. Um, that is that river going east to west. And then further north, along the mountain range, we get into the land of the Inuit and the Aleut. And there are two rivers that go on from two sides of the mountain range. Um, one that goes off into uh, the west towards the North Pacific, maybe even the Bering Strait, that vicinity, and that's out there. And then another that goes further north and somewhat east into the Arctic uh, area. Um, so those are those two rivers. Then we go a little bit east to the middle of the continent, right, and we find another big river called the Mississippi. Haha, it's the same name. And the Mississippi uh, brings the waters from the plains all the way out and travels from north to south into, again, the Gulf of Mexico, um, and where the Taino reside. Um, so there's that. And then we have one final river on this list, which comes from the biggest collection of fresh water on Earth, and continues from the land of the Haudenosaunee and the Algonquin towards the North Atlantic. Um, and that's out into that vicinity amidst the Hudson Bay and Atlantic Ocean and additionally. So those are the big rivers on this list. And if you counted all that, if you counted through the coherence of that, it's about 31, about 31 rivers there. So, like I said, from there we can discern effective zones and areas where people are congregate, settle, and build civilizations accordingly. Um, and it provides very beneficial perspective and context for understanding human civilization, human settlement, human migration, human belief, human activity, human beings, and additional beings. Um, so that's pretty much a wrap for this joint. Um, leave it at that. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Zajen. Adios. Te chagris. Asabina osuguro. Kerliko Fred. One love and peace.